A dirty bomb is very easy to make. The notion that it's nothing to worry about is also something that's dangerous.
The reference is just the defiance and a search for into unknown territory, and maybe going against the rules.
From the famous Acme Theater in Hollywood, it's the Gregory Mantell Show.
Today, a big concern these days is whether terrorists might try to explode a dirty bomb or nuclear weapon in America. What can we do to try to make sure this doesn't happen, and could we find the bomb before it went off? Jeffrey Richelson, author of Defusing Armageddon, Inside Nest, America's Secret Nuclear Bomb Squad, is here. And later in the show, one of LA's hottest emerging artists joins us, Ramses, and art curator Rochelle Monique. Pleasure to have you here today, Jeffrey.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So how prepared are we? Are we in a good position to find a bomb if someone tried something, and could we disable it before it went off?
Well, certainly we have an organization, the Nuclear Emergency Support Team, that has trained for this for years, has maybe 1,000 people, up to 1,000 people available to call upon to respond to a threat that there's a nuclear device or a dirty bomb in an American city. These represent some of the best trained people in the country in all the areas that you would be needed from disablement to health physics to radiation detection. How well they would do depends on a variety of factors. One would be intelligence. If it's an actual nuclear device, meaning something with uranium or plutonium that would explode like the Hiroshima bomb, then they would really need some intelligence to go with their skill in order to pinpoint where that device is.
Okay.
Because it's very hard to find that.
Because they do have radiation detectors and that sort of things that'll work in some cases.
They have radiation detectors in aircraft, on vans, in cars, in briefcases, anywhere you could put it, they have it. The question is getting close enough to one of those devices to know that it's there and to distinguish it from just sort of natural background radiation.
And how good are those devices at doing that?
Well, if you get close enough, they're pretty good. I don't know that there's any certainly unclassified data on exactly how close you have to get and exactly what characteristics the bomb would have to have for you to detect it at a particular range. But part of the rationale is to have people who could get very close. So that you would have, for example, you might have somebody designed as, disguised as a tourist who, if you were looking at people walking down the street, they might be carrying a briefcase or a backpack, and they might have something in their ear, which you might think is from an iPod, but in fact it's linked to the radiation detector, and if they get close enough to this device, it'll warn them that it's there.
Because they actually, I thought that was interesting, these people are disguised to just blend in. They could look like you or me or somebody walking down the street, and even the equipment too is very much concealed. The
entire Nest operation is intended to allow people to get near something in a very covert manner. So there might be a pizza truck that ostensibly is Pizza Hut or Domino's, but might actually be full of Nest equipment rather than hot pizzas.
No, what surprised me too when I was reading this is that, because I thought, oh, we've never had anything like this happen in this country, thank God, and I thought these people must be sitting around bored. I was surprised how frequently this group is in action. There are a lot of things they're out there doing that I...
Yes, well, first of all, there have been a lot of threats over the years, and between 1970 and 1993 there were over 100 threats. And most of those could be dismissed pretty easily by people examining the threats and realizing that if the person couldn't spell right in a lot of cases, they probably couldn't put together a bomb.
So they don't always deploy the team just because of the threat?
No, the first step is when when a threat comes in, it goes to a credibility assessment center, largely at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory. And they look to see, is this something that was just lifted from a Tom Clancy novel or some other novel, or does it really have some basis to cause people to worry? And if it does, then they actually send out people looking for this device. And they have done that on double-digit numbers of occasions. And there have been also cases where they've responded to a crashed Soviet satellite in Canada, or other...
Several crashed Soviet satellites, apparently.
Yes. Well, there's one that actually triggered a deployment in 1978. There have been a couple of others that were very close to doing that.
And they also send them out as a precaution to what, like the Super Bowls and the presidential inauguration?
That's become more frequent over the years. There's now something that, since the Clinton administration, has been called national special security events. And that's basically anything where you would consider it to be a major terrorist target. So that's the Super Bowl, the Major League Baseball All-Star Games, the political conventions for each party, major economic summits, all those type of things. And what they do in advance is they will do a radiation scan of the area to determine what the background radiation is. And then they will go out at the time of the event and see if anything has changed, or there's sudden spikes that could be explainable by a nuclear device being hidden somewhere.
So how easy is it to make a dirty bomb or a nuclear weapon or obtain one?
Big difference. A dirty bomb is very easy to make. And in fact, a lot of the people I've spoken to associated with NEST said this was a bigger concern for them than a nuclear device, because a dirty bomb, while it's much less damaging than a nuclear device, because it's conventional explosives mixed with radioactive material like cesium or cobalt. A lot of this can be gotten from, say, medical devices or other equipment that is not associated with nuclear weapons. But that could do a fair amount of damage, particularly in contaminating an area. That's fairly easy to detect and fairly easy to build. A nuclear device is much harder. You need very precision tools to design the device. You need the fissile material, which for a terrorist group pretty much would have to be stolen, because it would be very difficult for a terrorist group to run a uranium enrichment facility, much less operate a nuclear reactor. So they would have to get that from some country. Then they would need to machine a device, whether it's an implosion device or a gun-type device. And that would not be easy to do, but it's certainly within the capabilities of a group. And a physicist and somebody else once put together a sort of notional idea or concept of how this would be done. And it would take about $5 to $6 million. It would take a certain number of people over the course of a year, but it wouldn't be impossible to do.
Because that's one concern I think people have, right, is how readily available some of this information apparently could be on the internet, or people may try to buy off scientists, that sort of thing.
Well, I don't know that there's so much on the internet that anybody could do it in his backyard type of thing.
So is that kind of a myth, because some people think that, you know?
Well, there's a lot that's out there. You still need skilled scientists to translate the instructions into reality. You still need skilled technicians to actually design the device and build the device. So it's not, you know, it's harder than putting together the bed from IKEA, although that can be pretty hard.
Yeah, I've had trouble putting together IKEA stuff, so I can
but
relate
still
to
it would be harder than that.
I needed a team for the IKEA stuff, so.
Yeah, I had to hire somebody. But it's still something that would not be that easy to do, but would be doable.
And what are some of the biggest threats that have happened over the years? I know some of them, well, it's almost funny, but the one came from, what, a 14-year-old kid?
The first threat that we really know about was a 14-year-old in Orlando, Florida, who decided, I guess he wanted to get rich quickly, and he sent a letter to the Orlando Police Department saying that if you don't pay me a certain amount of money, I forget how much it was somewhere in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'll detonate a device and pretty much ruin Orlando for you. And they wrote back to the drop site and asked for more information, because all he had proved so far was that he was capable of threatening them. And he sent a design of a nuclear weapon, which they took to an air base, and the officer there, the weapons officer there, said he thought it might work. Eventually they found out it was a 14-year-old kid who was working at the at a abandoned house, or a house near an abandoned site, where he told them to drop the information and the money. And he was detained, and he got off a lot easier than probably somebody would today, with just a suspended sentence, and was sort of sentenced to work with scientists, so that his sort of technological interests were challenged, were channeled in the right direction.
These days, you might expect him to take it to school and blow up something. So
yes.
We'll be right back with Jeffrey Richelson. And we are back with Jeffrey Richelson, author of Defusing Armageddon. Well, I know there are two schools of thought on this, that some people think it's just a matter of not if, but when, and then the other people think it's less likely that somebody would either try to or could actually pull it off. Whether it's, do you think that it's just a matter of time before
Not
either?
really. Well, the statement, it's not a matter of if, but when, doesn't tell you anything more than it's going to happen sometime before the sun explodes. So that's a fairly wide range of time.
But not in the near future.
Well, I think there's a non-zero probability that it could occur tomorrow. That we might have missed all the signs, that some terrorist group has acquired the material and has built the device. So there's always some possibility. But I'm sort of cautiously optimistic on the grounds that it hasn't happened yet. Even a dirty bomb hasn't happened yet, which would have been much easier to build. And that all the scare stories we've heard about the Al-Qaeda having acquired backpack nukes or all sorts of other nuclear weapons, seem to have been, complete fabrications or completely wrong, because unless they're waiting for the tricentennial, you would have think that they would have detonated it by now. I do think, though, that the notion that it's nothing to worry about is also something that's dangerous, because we do want people in the government worrying about this, worrying about what possible sources of fissile material are out there and how we can make sure the terrorists don't get it, worrying about nuclear weapons in Pakistan or Russia and how terrorists might acquire them, and seeing that that doesn't happen. So I certainly think there needs to be parts of the government that are very vigilant about preventing this from happening, but I don't think it's something that people should be losing sleep over or in a panic over or thinking, it's going to happen any day. It could, but I don't think there's any reason to think that's highly likely at the moment.
But the thinking after 9/11, though, has changed to the point where people, some people may have thought in the past, like, oh, people wouldn't really want to kill that many people or something. But I mean, at least there's a recognition that some people would like to if they could.
It's changed in two ways, but it was really the Aum Shinrikyo group in Japan that changed the thinking, because it was clear after the attack on the Tokyo subways that you had a group that was willing to kill large numbers of people in pursuit of its objectives. And this was a group that also was interested in trying to acquire nuclear weapons and all sorts of other weapons from Russia. So it really happened before 9/11. What's happened since 9/11 is one nest has become more active, more secretive, more widely deployed. Some people have said that because of all the additional security after 9/11, it's even less likely that an attack would occur rather than more likely. So I don't think 9/11 changed the notion that that there were people out there who wanted to do a lot of damage. It gave it a maybe somewhat more dramatic face in terms of the face of Al-Qaeda, but even before that, people were thinking that now there are terrorist groups out there that want to do immense damage.
Would be willing to do it. And of course, one of the other issues, as you mentioned, is just daunting the amount of stuff that's out there that people could get their hands on. Everything from, the nuclear arsenals in the old Soviet countries to medical devices, and what kind of stuff is out there, and what is the government concerned about? That you said that they're trying to make sure don't go into the wrong hands.
At one end, there are nuclear weapons, and so they certainly are worried about what happens if things descend into chaos in Pakistan. And how do you secure
How secure are the nuclear weapons in Pakistan, in your
Well,
opinion?
nobody knows for sure, because the Pakistanis certainly aren't talking about it. And while we've provided them aid, they are not about to have U.S. representatives of any sort go to the facilities where they're stored, because they don't want us to know exactly where they're stored. They don't want us to know everything about the security involved. So there's certainly an incentive for the Pakistani government and the people in the military to try to make them very secure. But what happens if the country really descends into chaos, we don't know for sure.
There was some talk that there could be a plan that the U.S. would go in and how plausible, to remove their nuclear weapons in the right circumstances?
Yes, when Condoleezza Rice was testifying before Congress at the beginning of the Bush administration, she suggested that there were contingency plans, and it was something that she would want to talk about in closed session rather than in public. And certainly, I would imagine there exist contingency plans for Russia, maybe for Pakistan, maybe for North Korea. What those plans say about how likely it is that a mission like that would succeed, we don't know. We'd expect it would be very costly. And whether it would ever be implemented, I guess it depends on the specific circumstances.
Now, in Iraq, there was a lot of talk about weapons of mass destruction before the war, and whether or not, people think that there are or were, was trying or did try. One thing, though, you really brought out in the book, though, is that so many of those facilities were looted. I mean, do you feel comfortable with, because, people say, oh, they didn't find anything, but it sounded like all the facilities were ransacked when they got there. I mean, do you think we have an accurate assessment of what was really in those places and where it went, or is that not a concern for you?
Well, where it went, probably not very good account. What was in there, probably from all the other documents that we've gotten. As far as I know, what was in there was more yellow cake and basic uranium rather than fissile material.
So nobody really thinks they had a weapon that got away or something?
No,
like
not
that.
the weapon got away, nor the material to build one directly, not to just put in a bomb. You'd still have to refine it, which, as I said, with regard to a terrorist group, would be a very difficult thing for them to do.
Well, Russia's been a big concern because partly just after the break of the Soviet Union and maybe the general Russian way of doing things, that about whether some of this material was secure, and the U.S. has been providing a lot of assistance to, in some cases, transport material to America or help them lock things up better, and what's been going on in that area?
Yes, there have been a couple of initiatives. One is to help the Russians account for their material and protect their material in terms of various physical security measures, but also measures for knowing how much material they actually have and making sure it's all there. The U.S. has also been involved in establishing radiation monitor centers or portals at various borders to try to detect any radioactive material that might have escaped the country that's involved, that somebody's trying to smuggle out. Certainly the U.S. is keeping a watch on nuclear security in Russia. The National Intelligence Council, I think every year, prepares a report that is actually public. You can get it on the CIA website or the National Intelligence Council website, that talks about the security of Russian nuclear weapons. So it's a question of watching and helping. Again, like with any other country that's not a close ally, there are things that we're not going to get from them in terms of information, and cooperation we're not going to get. So it's a question of reducing the probability as much as we can, and making it as difficult as possible for a terrorist to get a nuclear weapon from them.
Well, we're almost out of time, but you say, though, that this went from being a very secretive federal agency in the past to the point where some of this, like the radiation detectors and things, are really deployed at the local level with police departments. Some cases, cities have networks of them deployed. So it's really taken on a whole new dimension these days.
Yes, that is certainly one of the dramatic impacts of 9/11. I mean, before that, this was largely a nest activity. And now it's a local activity. There are other agencies in the federal government, like the Domestic Nuclear Detection Office, that's working on other aspects of the problem. So it certainly spread from a, one point in the government to a national thing at federal level, state level, and local level.
Well, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Jeffrey Richelson, author of Defusing Armageddon. Up next, artists Ramses and Rochelle. We'll be right back. And we are back with Ramses, one of the hottest young emerging artists in LA, and Rochelle Monique, curator of the Substrate Fine Art Gallery. Great to have you here today, Ramses.
Nice to see you, Greg.
Rochelle.
Thank you.
Well, I went to check out your current exhibition, which is Pen, Paint, and Poison. So what's that all about?
Well, Darren and I, we've been discussing having a show for a couple of years, and finally we said we just needed to get a good title and get it going. So that's where we started. We started from a title, and I came up with Paint, Pen, and Poison, based on Oscar Wilde's book, Pen, Pencil, and Poison.
Okay.
And then he came up with the second part of it,
Because I saw
the
pen and paint, and I wasn't sure where the poison was. But you have some samples for us of here, some of your work? What's this?
This is what Rochelle's holding up right now is the
This
flyer.
is just the flyer from the show.
Did
the
you
collaboration,
design that
yeah.
poster?
Well, I started with the image, with the Adam and the Eve image, and then Darren included his style of his genre of work, which is really
the eyeballs
loose.
and
And great lettering, and so we used this as our invitation for the show, and we made some posters and numbered them, and So this is the invitation here.
Well, I noticed, okay, as you said, you have the Adam and Eve reference, the apple. Can you show us the apple? Because I know you brought that with us
I
here
do these in
today.
a series, and this is the first of a series of 5. And when it gets to the very end, it's an apple that's completely eaten. It's the apple core.
And as I told you, I said I'm at that point. I'm at the eaten apple. I'm at the thrown away core. But so what's this? Tell us what this is all about. What's the significance of that? I kind of get the biblical thing, but you want to...
Yeah, the reference is just the defiance and a search for into unknown territory, and maybe going against the rules to find out that kind of information.
Ah. So, and of course the reference to the Garden of Eden and eating the apple and...
Yeah, so what I did is I started out with a single apple, and I myself took bites out of it and photographed it.
Oh.
And I used that as the series to eliminate pieces from the apple.
So you actually did eat the apple?
Yeah, I
I'll
did.
be damned. Now, can I see the other one? I know you've got another one.
Yeah, I
there,
make
too.
these in a
What's-
monochromatic series in white.
Okay.
My gallery is white, and I feel it's a really nice color. It reminds me of heaven, so that's why it's...
So this is also the apple at the pre-eaten stage?
Yeah, this is the complete full apple before the actual interaction with it.
Okay. Now I wonder what a psychologist would say. You brought the one that wasn't eaten, not the one that was. So maybe you're still in the beginning phase, like the rest of us. But so when you see these in a gallery, of course, you have them lined up on the wall and you show the different stages. And there is you catch kind of the Andy Warhol resemblance with some of the Coke can and different things like that. I know you were influenced by Andy Warhol.
Yeah, very much so. I really like screen printing. My father was a hand letterer, sign painter, and a pinstriper, and I learned quite a bit from him watching him. But a lot of the process was very similar to what Andy Warhol used in his screen prints, and eliminating halftones and just using solid black and white.
So kind of even a minimalist approach to Andy Warhol, kind of.
Yeah,
'cause
even
you saw a lot
stripping
of-
that down a little bit.
Yeah, because his work I know is very colorful a lot of times, but yours is more, you like the...
Yeah, I like the more demure tones, and monochrome especially.
So Rochelle, I know you're excited about Ramses and his partner Darren Graylish, who also was did part of the work in that poster. So what got you excited about Ramses?
Well, his work mainly. We've been working together now for the past year, and we've had shows here in Los Angeles, and as well as lectures, and also in Las Vegas. And his work just speaks for itself.
And he's actually had exhibitions all over the world, I think, right? Or
He
other
has.
places.
He has. Mm-hmm.
For instance, I think Scandinavia. you've
Yeah, I
done
showed
various
there quite a
things,
bit in
and
Copenhagen, and did really well there, and really influenced by their industrial designers, so I think it kind of came back around.
Right, because I know, of course, well, we talk about IKEA in the other segment. I think your work is beyond that, but I know the Scandinavian. There's the whole. They're definitely big on. I think there's the museum in Copenhagen about design or
Yeah,
or
I
Stockholm, one of the two,
can't
I
think of the
forget.
name of it right now, but I've been there.
They really resonate with the minimal approach. I think that's why they love his work so much.
Now you also have musical influences, though.
Yeah, I do. I have a lot of music references. I use a lot of my friends that are in bands. I use them as my models for
And
my
you're
pieces.
a musician yourself.
And I play guitar in a band, yeah.
So you've got the art and the music side. But one of the reasons I wanted to have you on today to talk about the art is just that, we have a lot of authors on. We just had an author on and actors, and sometimes I'm more, I think, like intellectual, you can read a book and analyze it. But when I'm on vacation, I go to a lot of art museums in Europe and that sort of thing. And I'm always wondering how to approach art, because I'm always very analytical. But you were kind of talking about your theory of art, but are you more, some people think it's more like emotion or you have to experience it, whereas I'm always trying to analyze it. Am I looking at it the wrong way, or how do you approach something like this? How do you
when I go to a museum,
absorb?
my favorite part of a museum is the sculpture garden. I like the way the shadows...
Me too, actually.
Yeah, I like the way the light creates shadows, and you capture the full three-dimensional effect of the art. I like walking around it, and looking at it positive and negative. And I try to transpose that too into my artwork on a flat plane,
Whenever I go to some of these big European museums and stuff, I have to admit a lot of times I'll skip the European paintings and stuff, go right to the sculptures. Because I've always been fascinated by, so even like at the Louvre, the first place I go is to the sculptures, I skip the rest of it, but don't tell anybody that. But so, obviously you're on the pop and, modern art side. What do you think about that versus classical art?
I like them both.
Is that passé, or you like both?
Yeah, I do. I really do appreciate them both. I like when you can take the old and make it new again. Because at one time, that classic artwork was new. It was contemporary.
It was the modern art or the contemporary, yes.
So I like using both.
And are there any particular parts of any particular, artists? I mean, we mentioned Andy Warhol from contemporary, but any of the older?
As far as like modern graphic design and modern art, I like Peter Saville. I really think he's really amazing typesetter and just amazing visual artist, conceptual artist.
Now, I know that, like a lot of artists actually in history, you were commissioned to do some of these, that it's not always art for art's sake, somebody's paying you, you have a job. How do you feel about that? I always think it's, you hear about like in the movies, box office versus art and all of this, or in TV shows, how much is, or do you get to do what you want, and how much is, do you feel like you're selling out if you're selling the painting and making money on it, or is that just part of the way it works?
I think it's part of the way it works, and I think it's good to have parameters to work within. I think that's an art in itself, to work within certain constraints and making it work. And
so somebody gives you a project and you take it on
absolutely,
and bring it to
yeah.
life. And I thought it was interesting you said too you were influenced by some of like the big houses in the desert and that sort of thing when you were growing
I'm really
up.
interested in architecture. I grew up out in Palm Springs, California, and we have a big collection of mid-century modern architecture out there. And I spent a lot of time in those collections of architecture, and really inspired by the shapes and minimalist movements that are created when the sun's traveling over them.
Well, in our final minute here, Rochelle, is there anything that you want to tell us we should be looking out for these guys, Ramses who's here, or your gallery, that we should be aware of?
Well, we have he'll be having a one-man show coming up within the next month. And he's also having a show at Extra Large. What's the date on that, Ramses? That's in March.
It's in a few days.
It's in a few days.
It's on Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday.
Okay.
So.
Well, unfortunately, there's a delay between when we tape and when it airs, but I know you're out there doing your thing. Well, thank you very much, Ramses, for being here today. Rochelle Monique with
Thank
the
you.
Substrate
Thank you so
Fine
much.
Art Gallery. And I'll come and check out some more of your apples.
Right on. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time.